Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and this is week 5 of my future fantasy world building setting that I am creating. And today we're actually going to talk about dwarves. And so let's head on right into it. So, the dwarves that I had envisioned for this setting are pretty typical from your Tolkien esque type fantasy or some of your high fantasy stuff that you might see in Dungeons and Dragons, in Faerun, and stuff like that. But there's going to be a couple differences. Let's start with the main planet. So, the planet is called Mortodur, which is going to be like a Mustafar type planet or even a Mordor type planet where it's just barren, there's a lot of volcano. The gravity is going to be high, which would account for the dwarves' short nature, let's just say. And it's the perfect place for them to be miners and get a lot of resources and minerals and stuff like that, which they're going to need. This isn't actually their home planet, I want to say. It's just their main planet that they're sticking to now. And so, really, what happened a long time ago when the dwarves were created by the Stone Father, let's just say, they were actually exiled from their home planet because they weren't growing. As in, they had reached a technological level and they couldn't overcome that barrier. And so let's just say the Stone Father cast them out so they could continue to learn and be the dwarves that they were meant to be, or something like that. Something along those lines. And that's really how they came to be on Mortordur, this lava barren wasteland. And so they've actually excelled quite well in this environment. They've become the master shipbuilders of the universe, let's just say, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So as I've already mentioned, uh, the the dwarves, they believe in the Stone Father or their creator, and this is a very patriarchal society, by the way, and you're gonna see that as we get into the clans and even in the religion here. But they believe in the Stone Father who created them from the stone, and so they tend to worship stone, and they also have something called like or something of it like an obelisk. I haven't created a name for it yet, but this is where they actually write down their history. They don't actually categorize their history in numerical values like we do, like in 1776 America was founded and stuff like that. But they actually write down a record of all their heroic deeds on these obelisks. And there's actually a great, ginormous obelisk in their main city in Mortordur, which basically encompasses all of the clans. So, speaking of clans, there's actually 4 major houses for the dwarves, and I've actually named them according to some of the Norse terms, which is Nordri, which means north, Sudri, which is south, Austri, I believe, is east, and Vestri is west. Hopefully, I got that right. So, those are the 4 major houses, and every clan kind of is encompassed in one of those houses. There's only one exception, and we'll get into that very, very soon. So, the dwarves are patriarchal, which means that all of their politics are governed around the males, men. And actually, the clans are separated by their beard styles. Instead of tattoos or anything like that, their beards for that specific clan is the same across all males. So what do we do with the females? Well, females don't really have beards, and I'm going off of Dragon Age dwarves by this point, where female dwarves actually don't have beards. Um, well, yeah. So females in the dwarven world that I've envisioned aren't actually part of a clan. They're clanless. Hold on, before you call me a sexist pig, there's actually, well, aside from the not having a beard rule thing that I've just come up with, they actually have something else. So, females don't have a clan per se. Instead, all of the females are encompassed in actually one of the major houses, which is Sudri, means south. And that means they're actually going to have the biggest major house amongst all of the dwarven houses and clans. And so while females do not belong to any clan, they do marry into other clans, let's just say, but they're not really part of a clan. They belong to the Sudri major house, which has actually gained a lot of political power because of their outstanding size. I mean, it's like if we're cutting it in half, like 50% male and 50% females, well, 50% of all dwarves are actually in this one house. So it's kind of a way to balance things out a little bit, to kind of still keep it as a patriarchal society, but still giving women a lot of power. And they've got quite a bit of power, especially since each of the four houses can only elect a king instead of the Sudri's major house. They're going to elect a queen, which actually governs all dwarves. So, like, a quarter of the population is being ruled by females. So, there you go. So, there's actually another clan that does not encompass any of the four major houses, and I had to actually plug this in because, you know, if you're thinking of Tolkien, the House of Durin is just, it's just very popular. It's one of the major clans in Tolkien's Middle Earth, and so I just wanted to kind of give a little nod back there. The clan of Durin is actually not part of any of the major houses. They've actually got quite a bit of some standing among themselves where they don't need to have that buffer, let's just say, and they actually have associated themselves away from the major houses, which means that they're also not obligated to go to war when there's a great major house war, which there's, I think, like been 39 of them, which is just a random number that I rolled. So, yay. So instead, the clan of Durin are actually just heroic figures. They're adventurers. They like to go out and do these heroic deeds, and as such, they actually have the most heroic deeds on the main obelisk in Mortordor, which I thought would be actually pretty interesting, pretty cool to have that, you know, one of the powerful clans is actually not part of any of the major houses, and, you know, they're actually really cool and powerful and stuff like that. So that's enough about the major clans and the major houses, at least until we get into the politics. And actually, I guess we'll go ahead and get into that right now. So each of the major houses elects a head king to govern all of the clans under that major house. So Nordri would have one king, and he will encompass all the clans that associate with that major house. And so that means there's four kings. Now, in intergalactic politics, at least in this future fantasy setting, usually a species like say humans, Earth is going to have probably like some sort of a governing person, like a president or something like that, that oversees things in Earth or maybe even the Sol system. But they wouldn't actually be an intergalactic diplomat. Instead, they would probably elect somebody into their cabinet to be the diplomat for the human species, or at least as far as the Sol system is concerned. With dwarves, it's a little bit different. So all four of the kings, or three kings and one queen, are actually interested in intergalactic politics. That means when decisions need to be made that concerns all of dwarves, all four of them are going to be seated at whatever round table or whatever I decide to create it, and they would actually kind of govern their people or have a say. So there's actually four instead of just one, or however many I decide to come up with. But that's as far as I've really gotten into politics. Government is not really my strong suit, and it's something I want to kind of do a little bit more research on before I finalize that part. Let's get into the ships and tech. So I kind of hinted at this in a previous video, but dwarves, their ships are going to be massive, and they're going to be akin to what you find in Warhammer 40k, those giant citadel ships. They're very angular, they're very intimidating for sure, and they just kind of look like cities or buildings in space. But the way that dwarves achieve FTL, they actually they actually heavily calculate the distance of where they want to go, and what they do is they actually create some sort of an explosion behind their engines which will propel them that distance. That's all I'm gonna that's kind of where I'm just gonna leave it at that. They're basically creating like mini nuclear explosions or whatever, and that would theoretically propel them at enough speed to achieve FTL. Not a very fast FTL, mind you, but, you know, it's better than just going at standard speed, I guess. in system speed. So the dwarves actually aren't weaponsmiths, but they are master shipbuilders. And so a lot of their ship designs are going to be very imposing, like buildings and stuff like that. And it's just going to be like they're going to show off a little bit. That's what I'm trying to say. I have two different dwarf types that I've been thinking about. So I've got the clans, and that's fine. But I also kind of wanted to branch out a little bit. And so what I've come up with are cleric dwarves, which are these dwarves that believe, or these dwarves that are actually looking for their original home world that the Stonefather kind of exiled them from. And so they have these fleets or these ships that just go off into deep space whenever, and their job is to just basically do research on planets and look for any remnants of where, ancient dwarves might have lived in. Their whole goal is to find their home world or their original home world. And so they are very heavily of the faith. Don't quite know how that's going to work out yet, depending on what system I get, but I'm basically giving clerics to the dwarves for this purpose. Then we have Chaos Dwarves, which is something from Warhammer Fantasy, I believe. And so these dwarves, there's actually two different thought processes going on here, and that I'm going to decide on. One is that these are dwarves that have fallen under the influence of some otherworldly being. So maybe like a cosmic Cthulhu or something like that is influencing these dwarves, and they kind of go batshit crazy. The other process that I'm actually thinking about is that they've fallen prey to some sort of a deadly disease or a mutation. So not a cosmic horror, but something a little bit more tangible. And basically, these are dwarves that get turned into like some sort of a hellish golem, stone golem. So their flesh turns to stone. You can see that there's lava running underneath them and stuff like that. And some of the more formidable chaos dwarves are actually spellcasters too. And so that's something that I kind of got from Warhammer a little bit. And I'm going to try to flesh them out a little bit more. So that's my whole rough draft process, at least in terms of the dwarves. I'm not going to detail a complete history like I did with the humans, because the dwarves are not really concerned with that. They're only concerned with some of the great heroes. And of course, I'll go ahead and list those off when I create them. But anything other than that, like all 39 of the great house wars, I'm not even going to bother detailing what that is. Or like as far as when it happened in Dwarven history, because it really doesn't quite matter in a way. So there we go. That is kind of all that I have for the dwarves. At this point, it's just going to be a process of fleshing things out a little bit more and adding on, especially like things like colonies. So the dwarves, at least, let's see, I have it written down. The 4 major houses actually specialize in something. So, for example, Vestry is a major house. They excel at mining, so a lot of their colonies are going to be based on moons or asteroids and just kind of encompass like bases where they can get some valuable and rare minerals and stuff like that. Austri is a clan of adventurers too. Might change that to artisans, because Nordry is going to be the house of the master shipbuilders and possibly artisans as well. But I feel like giving Austri the adventuring status kind of takes away from Durin a little bit. So maybe they're not as great of adventurers as the clan of Durin, but oh well. So it's just going to be fleshing out the 4 major houses, creating some head figures to run in whatever gear that I decide to run a game at, and just having all of that stuff there. So feel free to leave a comment down below, give this video a huge thumbs up to support this series, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I don't have any new questions this week that I'm going to try to flesh out, because I've actually been gone for 2 weeks. And I thought that I was going to be able to flesh out the dwarves over those 2 weeks, and it turned out that homework in postgraduate college or whatever, undergrad college, is actually pretty tough, especially when it's got to get done in 2 weeks. So, oops, didn't get to think about dwarves until like a few days ago. So, that's all that I have for like the 3 days that I've been actually able to sit down and think. But I will definitely start up the questions again, and I've actually gotten quite a bit of feedback about some of those questions and stuff like that. Still got to figure out what to do with halflings though. But anyways, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.